Hi, I'm Mark Mazzaferro, and it's time for another episode of On the Beat. And with us, as always, on the beat is Vacaville Police Chief John Carli. John, thanks for being here today.
As always, it's good to be here.
You know, we haven't done one of these in a while, so we've got some catching up to do. So what's been going on in the department in the last 3 or 4 months? A little of this and a little of that, I guess.
Well, it seems to be so. We're in spring, if you didn't know. The hot weather and the school being out now, it really creates an atmosphere where everyone is out and about town, and sometimes in not necessarily good ways. So we've been dealing with a little uptick in some of the activity, which is normal for this time of year. In the winter months, everyone is inside. It's cold. We have the sun's out late. It's beautiful, so we get a lot more activity out in the community.
That's something I noticed yesterday. I'm sitting there watching the end of the basketball game, and it's like 9 o'clock, and it's still light outside. You know, not bright light, but light enough to maneuver, right? I'm like, wow, the days are getting longer and longer, aren't they?
Yes.
Which is problematic for you guys, I guess, huh?
Well, especially when there are people in our community that are up to no good. And while we do enjoy living in a relatively safe community, in comparison, the question always is what is it that we want here for Vacaville?
Right.
And the idea of living in a society that's absent of crime and people that are out, to commit crimes against us is really something that is not in the question today, especially with all the challenges of what I would call the great social experiment here in California, with realignment, Prop 47. On the heels of that this year, Prop 57 will kick in sometime this fall, which will be early inmate release.
Yeah. So we're decriminalizing crime, basically, is what it sounds like, huh?
That's correct. Certainly our initially Prop 47 was a reduction of the criminal penalties. And under the auspices of the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act. And so here we are getting ready to feel the effects of the public safety realignment.
Right.
And that really is a releasing of potentially dangerous and violent felons out of our state prison system.
Well, that's good to know. I'll be staying inside for, when does that kick in? I won't be going outside anymore, just to work at home.
Yeah, it went into effect during the last election cycle, but the details are still being worked out. I would suspect sometime this fall, the elements of what is really in the bill, actually it was a ballot measure, but what is coming out of Sacramento on how to do this and how to roll out who gets released.
Yeah. So without fearful that we're going to frighten all our residents, what kind of things can we do to keep ourselves safe, for lack of a better expression?
Well, I don't really want to take away from some of the British mantra, but sometimes it's the idea of, remain calm. That's what they would say. But if you see something, say something.
Right.
Sometimes what we're afraid to do is when something does not look right, we don't want to speak up. We don't want to be that person. And in group settings, it's even worse. If you're alone, you look around and you ask yourself, if not for me, who's going to make the phone call?
Yeah, right.
But if you're in a group, sometimes it's easier to justify, well, somebody else will call. Well, surely I'm not the only one that saw that.
Right.
And we do welcome those calls. It's not as if when you think about the call volume that we take in every year, I would rather have the call and discern what it is than not get the call at all. And the partnership with the community is what makes a difference, because it's one thing for an incident to occur, a violent crime to occur. It's another thing to be able to address it and solve it and respond to it.
Speaking of calls, you mentioned this earlier in our conversation. Got a lot of calls for service last year into the comm center, didn't we?
About 138,000 calls into our comm center.
That's crazy. I mean, I didn't do the math, but that's a lot of calls just on a daily basis. That's incredible. Fun job over there, huh, dispatcher?
Well, they certainly have a skill set of trying to discern what the issue is, and they truly are a partner on every call. Whether it's the mundane call, sometimes you never know what the person's going to call in for, or an emergency call. They're the first ones in our comm center to deal with life-saving measures, passing on arrival instructions to family members if it's a medical crisis, It could be a law enforcement critical incident that's occurring, and the dispatcher has to connect with a person on the other phone.
Right.
And trying to get information out that allows for the first responders to respond appropriately. At the same time, set the stage, having never seen the scene.
Yeah, right.
It's a critical role, and we're always looking for good dispatchers, and so, shameless plug, we do have openings.
cityofvacaville.com/jobs.
That's right.
So if you're interested, we're hiring.
That's right. And that's one of the things that we've seen is the need for a level of professional response, and our dispatchers are trained in critical incident, for the first arriving instructions for medical, but also tactical dispatch. So if for some reason there is events that we've seen recently,
Right.
Tactical dispatcher is one that gets embedded with the team on dealing with an emergency response.
Yeah, and that's something I've heard brought up by your officers at award ceremonies and things like that, where they talk about, people don't understand the value of a highly trained dispatcher in terms of really helping them be prepared for what they might be encountering when they arrive on the scene, not knowing what to expect.
A lot of people find it interesting to listen to a police scanner. Imagine the person on the tactical dispatch side that has to maintain absolute discipline, knowing the call signs, knowing the positions, knowing the resources and assets for each of them, and any movement and deployment.
Yeah.
That's their role. It's critical to have someone who knows what they're doing, and it's from my perspective and those in the business, what they do is paramount to a successful mission, and often goes behind the scenes and not necessarily publicly thanked, but I personally know what they do and thank them from the bottom of my heart. They work really hard every day.
That is a tremendously difficult job. Just listening to the regular scanner, forget the tactical response. It's like, wow. I every once in a while I think, well, I wonder how I would do as a dispatcher. Nah, I'd be making typos. But that job they do is
From the critical incidents and even recently, the ones that have become more notable, because anytime there's a loss of life or a critical incident involving a fatal use of deadly force at the hands of a police officer based upon activities
Right.
that may occur and crimes that are presented, everyone knows how to do the police officer's job. But I don't watch TV and know whether the doctor prescribed the right dose. But everyone seems to be interested. It's a fascinating profession, and so everyone believes that they understand
Sure.
what we do within 60 minutes, because that's usually the length of an episode. But I will say the recent events, I happened to be out one night over this last course of over the Memorial Weekend and the course of that week, and we had 3 incidents within 36 hours.
Yeah.
Highly critical, all compressed together, very taxing for our resources, but for our staff as well. You can just imagine how tense that can be. We ended up with a triple stabbing, a pursuit that ultimately led to deadly force, and then shortly after that, a homicide here in town. Now, we don't have that many homicides. It's been a couple of years since we've actually had
First one in 3 years.
Yes. And you just never know, depending upon what goes on in a community, when that's going to occur. You can never say it's never going to, because those are usually based upon people interacting with people,
Right.
versus something that's random. So a 36-hour period that stressed the department to its core, but I think the part for me that I was most proud of, even in the difficulty of it all, because again, the idea that you encounter deadly force incidents is that there is in those circumstances somebody lost their life, a family is grieving, because of a homicide. There's the vigils that are going on and being sensitive to all that, but at the same time solving it all.
Right. And I was going to say, I think the silver lining, so to speak, is that these have all been resolved, haven't they?
They have essentially been resolved in the sense that the people that we would be looking for.
Right, exactly. I mean, the case has been...
That's right. There's cases like this will take weeks, if not months, with all the parts to come together.
Right.
But essentially what you're looking for is, within the very short period of time, is collecting the evidence necessary for prosecution. And that becomes critical. And so in those moments, there is no break.
Right.
And a majority of the staff were on extended shifts, and the investigative units that were working, in some cases, were up almost 40 hours.
Yeah, I was going to
I
say,
think I
round
had
the clock.
Yeah,
I mean, I was getting texts
that's
from
right.
people all hours of the day and night. I'm like, God, they're not going to sleep, are
No.
they? They're just
No. That's the dedication and commitment of the staff that I'm most proud of, is even in those difficult moments, the department itself is vested and invested. And I saw it. I recall being out there in the middle of the night, one of those nights, and just watching the staff respond and looking for one of the suspects with just a feeling, we're going to find him tonight. And sure enough, within 2 hours, the officers were out there. They weren't just tired and exhausted and trying to recover. They were actually engaged trying to solve this so investigators could get some sleep and come back and continue to work another 36-hour shift.
But that, I mean, you got to attribute that to a few things, I would imagine. Number one, they know the community. Number two, most of them live in the community. Number three, they care about the community. And number four, good police work, right?
And that is what really makes a difference. And from a distance, it's hard to know that. Having been here for 28 years, it's something that I really do take pride in. And it's not because of me. It really is. It's the investment in the community, because most people live here.
Right.
And so they're involved, and they don't want to see a community degrade over time.
Sure.
And that's the concern is where is the safety of the community? Because that's what people really want to feel is we can't protect every call a person from being victimized. But what we do is we provide a sense of safety and an absence of fear by being engaged. But that engagement goes both ways. It's our community actually calls us,
Right.
and shares information, and we could not do our work without it. And so I thank the community for that.
We've said that so many times on this show with you, with your predecessors. Without the community being involved, we're not the safe community that we are today. I mean, it has to work that way.
Right.
You got to have that relationship.
I would call our community the super informant, because without information,
Right.
you're not going to get the tips. You may have connections, but what you really need is an engaged community.
Yeah, and
You
it's
do.
not. Yeah, it's not just crime though. I mean, like you had the kid that was missing on Mother's Day that just was out wandering the street,
That's
right?
right.
And it didn't take long to put him back together with his mother. It was like, well, that was quick, but that's
especially using social media.
Exactly.
To get information out. People are getting their morning coffee, and the word travels fast. And so there's another example of how we really are connected with the community.
Yeah. Well, again, our community is I think we have a great community, and I know we have a safe community, but it's such a good feeling to live here. You know, John, I love living here. And it's going to sound corny, but we're very happy living here. So.
And I don't, I don't try to create a false persona that there isn't crime. There is. And I would specifically be looking, usually every year what we're doing is trying to project, and our staff has been doing that right now, clearly, as we focus on, what do the next 2 years look like?
Right.
And how do we invest in the resources to focus on some of the trends? And clearly, with what's coming up with Proposition 57, if we use the indicators of the past, we know that there will be an increase in crime. And we're already seeing a report from 2016, which is done on a calendar year, says crime was lowered by 6%. However, we're halfway through 2017, and so we're on a fiscal cycle, and so oftentimes I'll report to council, well, halfway through this year, we're already up 8%.
Yeah.
And so the rebound effect isn't anything that's unique to Vacaville. It's coming across the state based upon some of these changes that we're actually being told we aren't going to charge for the misdemeanor. It's now an infraction. We're going to release the felon that committed a felony, reduce it to a misdemeanor, and release them. That doesn't mean that their behavior or attitude changes. So we sit on a corridor. We're in the Bay Area. We're a generous community, and we're a community that is, from a destination, people love to come and shop.
Right.
And so one of the things that I'm always looking at is how do we protect the interest of the community at the same time, don't become that victim. And so if I could tell anyone anything, is if you're going to come and shop, do not go to your car with bags in open center shopping centers, which are all over the community, and put them in the car and walk away. The problem with that is if the crew comes in from Sacramento region or the Bay Area region and they're looking, all they saw was you just put something in your car.
Probably something valuable,
Yeah.
or it could be.
And
So,
you think that I could just go in and get a cup of coffee. These crews are so good, they can do it in under 90 seconds.
right.
Because we've had some of those reports where I only was in there for a minute or two, and I come out and my laptop's gone, my cell phone's gone. Well, the trained criminal today, what they're doing is they will peruse a parking lot and they will wait and they will watch, and you won't see them. But the moment you get out, they're looking for people who are shoving things under their seat. Because you think you're hiding something, but what you're really doing is you're messaging to someone who's watching you what you're doing. So I always say, if you think you're going to be somewhere for a long term, don't allow the criminal element to watch you do that. So if you have to, at the traffic light beforehand, tell the kids, look, pick up everything, no electronics, no wires, nothing showing, so that when you get out, nothing's visible.
Right.
But instead, what we do is we hide things and we go into the club and we go into the coffee shop and we message to people that there's something to steal inside.
Or go into City Hall. I don't know how many times I park my car in our parking lot, look next to me, and there's a phone connected and a something under. I'm like, wow, people just. I mean, that's just crazy. Call me paranoid. I grew up in the city. You leave nothing out.
That's right.
Because you want it to be there when you get back, or you take it with you. But it's and we've been preaching that since before I got here. TLC, right?
That's right.
And yet still, boy. And same with women at the grocery store. I see so many. We've talked about this before.
Yes, we have.
They leave their purse in the buggy and turn around to, look at the Cheerios or whatever. They turn around, their purse is gone. It's like, well, don't just, put it on your shoulder. Don't, yeah. So
the trend, as I see it, is look, Vacaville's grown. We continue every year. There's more construction, there's more building, and people want to come into what's a safe city.
right.
And sometimes that's even the element of people that aren't necessarily in for the best interest of the community, because they too want some
They
safety.
want to be safe too, sure.
But when we talk about people's morals and values, I can't dictate.
Right.
There are programs for crime-free multi-housing, but as a free society, we can't check people their records and say, well, this isn't what we want. But we do a really, I think, a relatively good job at trying to decipher how do we address those issues, because people are really concerned with quality of life crimes. The challenge is not forgetting the fact that there are some really dangerous people out there that, if poked and prodded, could be very harmful. And so to the public, you won't know the difference of who's who. And so for me, I say, be careful about being a victim of a crime of opportunity. But the trend I think that we're seeing in California is the behavior of the criminal in general. Not everyone, but the trend is while we have called this, theft is a nonviolent crime, what we're seeing is the egregiousness to which they're willing to go in and not just steal, but how they're calculating what they're doing. And what people don't realize is some of them are armed. And so the crime itself may not appear to be a violent crime, but the criminal element that's doing it, almost like organized crime, can be dangerous.
Yeah.
And so my advice is, do not get involved in that, but if you see something that doesn't look right, please call. We would rather come into a parking lot, into an area, and actually look into it and make sure that people are safe.
And again, I mentioned earlier before we started about the woman who was concerned about two people in front of her house, taking photos. And my first thought was, call 911, right?
That's right.
If you're that concerned,
That's right.
call the police. They'll respond, and 99.9% of the time it's going to be nothing. But if you don't call, then, that's part of why you guys are here, right?
I would imagine that looking at the postal services and all the UPS and FedEx and everyone that's out there, they're working 7 days a week, and so the deliveries are in residential neighborhoods because people are shopping online,
Right.
which makes it more lucrative to peruse the neighborhoods if you're a would-be thief and to steal.
Oh,
So-
just follow a delivery truck. How tough is that? Stay a block behind. He pulls over, wait, go pick it up. I mean, I hate to give you advice on how to steal, but you need to be aware of that stuff,
And a lot more of our citizens have home security cameras,
Right.
which is very helpful. But in those cases, we really do appreciate the phone call. The last thing anyone wants to do is to say, hey, look, 10 cars got broken into on the street, or the packages around the corner are all stolen, and somebody say, well, that person looked like they belong. And again, not to scare anyone, but what we have seen is the trend is the more you try to look like you belong, the more people will leave you alone.
Right.
And in some cases, they're actually putting on clothing that makes them appear to be legitimate, working for a particular company. If it doesn't look right, call.
Yeah. Well, we've lived in our neighborhood now for about 6 months, and I pretty much know the folks who live in my neighborhood. I certainly know my neighbors, and you see people walking their dogs and riding their bikes and taking their kids to the park, and you get a familiarity with who's supposed to be there, and as you said, and as I said earlier, if you have doubt, call. I mean, it's better safe than sorry.
Well, I believe so, and that's my encouragement to our community,
Yeah.
to keep up those phone calls. It really does make a difference, and we solve so much because of the tips and the information we glean even in the middle of a case. And
Right.
so it's a tremendous help.
So be as vigilant as you are, maybe be a little more vigilant, huh?
Yeah, just pay attention.
Yeah. All right, anything else going on in the department? Things are good, I guess?
Well, we continue to always hire and recruit because one of our challenges isn't we have a long-standing tradition where people come here and they retire here, and we do. We've had a lot of people retire over the last year. I want to say it was about 15, and when you think of a department that's full-time staff of 160. Of those, a little over 100 are sworn positions, and then the support staff that
15 to
supports it.
20% of your officers left.
Yes.
That's
So
a big chunk,
It's
John.
a big chunk. And so for me, it's bittersweet in the sense that I've known these men and women for years. So it becomes a different workplace. It really isn't a revolving door here. That is the uniqueness of Vacaville is 9 out of 10 people that get hired somehow either grew up in Vacaville, live in Vacaville, family in Vacaville, something. And again, that is that recipe of being vested and invested, and it does make a difference.
Well, I mean, there was an article in the paper the other day about the fire department. I don't know if you saw that. The 5 guys that are all from Vacaville, grew up here, born and raised here, and now work together at, I think it was Station 71. I mean, that sums us up in a nutshell, if you ask me, in terms of, public safety and the city in general.
Well, look, I'll call them kids at this point in my life. There are what I would call kids that I saw growing up here, and now they're police officers,
Right,
or
right,
they're employed in the department. So it's one of those things that just tells you that is a uniqueness here that you just don't see everywhere. So.
Good deal. Well, John, thanks for taking a little time out of your day. We'll try not to space these out so far, but we got busy. You got busy.
Very busy. Very busy.
So hopefully we'll get back on our regular schedule again and do this a little more often, huh?
I love visiting with you. It's always a good conversation.
I enjoy it too. And I hope you all enjoyed it. And we'll see you next time on The Beat. Thanks.